I woke up choking on a scream that wouldn't come. The air was thick with my aunt's perfume. That cloying rose and vanilla scent that had been the last thing I smelled before she'd smiled and watched me sign away my life. My eyes flew open, and I was staring at the gaudy chandelier in the living room. The one I'd had to sell for pennies on the dollar 3 years ago. The one that was still hanging there, dripping crystal tears that caught the afternoon light that I was alive. I was back. And Margaret was standing 3 feet away, her hand pressed to her chest, delivering her opening monologue to the neighborhood women who'd gathered for what she called a support circle, but was really a tribunal to decide my fate. Poor dear, still so fragile, she cooed, her voice dripping with false sympathy. I'm afraid she's simply not capable of managing her own affairs. The doctor agrees. It's such a mercy that I'm here to take care of everything. The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd heard them before. I'd believed them before. I'd nodded along, grateful for her help, while she systematically stripped away every asset my father had left me. The house, the accounts, the trust. All of it funneled into her name, through a series of documents I'd signed in my grief-clouded haze. By the time I'd realized what was happening, it was too late. She'd had me declared unfit, and I'd spent my last months watching from the sidelines as she paraded around in my mother's pearls. Not this time that I pushed myself off the velvet chaise, the fabric rough against my palms. My legs were shaky beneath me, but I forced them to hold. Actually, Aunt Margaret, I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected, cutting through her performance like a blade through silk. The room went quiet. Every pair of eyes turned to me. I saw confusion. I saw curiosity. And I saw the flicker of something dark in Margaret's eyes before she smothered it. I've been thinking, I continued, walking toward the center of the room, my bare feet cold against the marble floor. I was still wearing the same silk pajamas she'd put me in, the ones that made me look helpless and small. About Daddy's will. About everything you've been handling for me. Margaret's smile tightened at the edges. Ellie, darling, you're not yourself. You've been through such a trauma. Why don't you lie back down and let me handle? I've already called the family lawyer. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water. I watched the ripples spread across every face. The neighbors exchanged glances. Margaret's smile froze, her jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. You what? I called Mr. Chun at his office this morning. I said, which was technically a lie. I'd called him 2 hours ago, from the bathroom phone, while Margaret was downstairs arranging the refreshments. I'd had to guess the number from memory, dialing with shaking fingers, praying it was still the same. It was. He's coming over tomorrow to review the estate. I've also asked him to contact the bank to freeze any large transactions, until I've been briefed properly. The silence was deafening. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower buzzed. In the kitchen, I could hear the maid clattering dishes. And Margaret was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. You're making a mistake, Eleanor, she said, and the slip of my full name told me everything I needed to know about how angry she was. You're not well, the doctor specifically said. The doctor was a friend of yours from your yoga class, I said flatly. I found his bill. You paid him to say I was unstable. It was a gamble. In my first life, I discovered that detail much later, after all the damage was done. But I watched Margaret's face drain of color and knew I'd hit something real. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Patterson, leaned forward with barely concealed delight. Margaret, is that true? Of course not. Margaret's voice cracked on the last word. She's confused. She's been having episodes I told you all about. The episodes were you. I walked closer to her, closing the distance between us until I was close enough to see the panic swimming in her pupils. You'd leave my medication on the counter. You'd tell me I'd taken it already, and I was too tired to argue. You'd find me crying and tell everyone it was a breakdown, but it was just grief, Margaret. Grief for a father I loved and an aunt I trusted. I heard Mrs. Patterson gasp. Mrs. Lindholm, the retired judge who lived 3 doors down, set her teacup down with a sharp click. This is serious, she said, her voice clipped and judicial. Margaret, if there's any truth to these accusations. There isn't. Margaret spun toward her, her composure finally cracking. She's lying. She's been acting out ever since Henry died. I've done nothing but support her, Protect her from her own reckless decisions. Reckless like selling the beach house for half its value to your brother-in-law. I said and watched her flinch. Reckless like transferring the stock portfolio into an account with your name on it. Reckless like telling the trustees I was too unstable to make my own choices while you helped yourself to my mother's jewelry. The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. One of the younger women pulled out her phone and started typing furiously. Margaret's face had gone from white to red. Her carefully constructed mask crumbling into something ugly and desperate. You ungrateful little brat, she hissed. And she was so close now I could see the spittle at the corners of her mouth. After everything I did for you, everything I sacrificed, your father would be. My father would be disgusted with you. My voice was ice. He trusted you. He made you my guardian because he believed in family. And you used his death to line your pockets. The slap came out of nowhere. Her hand connected with my cheek hard enough to snap my head to the side. And for a moment I tasted blood. The room went absolutely still. I turned back to face her slowly, letting her see the calm in my eyes, the absence of shock or fear. I have witnesses, I said quietly. And I have the videos. It was another lie. I had nothing. In my first life, I'd never thought to collect evidence until it was too late. But I'd learned from her playbook, and I knew that confidence was everything. Margaret's eyes darted around the room, seeing the faces of her friends, her allies, her carefully cultivated network. Every single one of them was staring at her like she was a stranger. A monster. I'm calling the police, Mrs. Lindholm announced, rising from her seat with the authority of someone who'd presided over 1,000 courtrooms. This has gone far enough. No. Margaret grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Ellie, tell them. Tell them you're confused. Tell them you didn't mean. I pulled my arm free. I meant every word, I said. And I'm not confused. For the first time in 3 months, I'm completely clear-headed. You tried to steal my inheritance, Margaret. You tried to steal my life. And I'm not letting you get away with it. She was escorted out of the house 20 minutes later. Not by police, but by her husband, who showed up red-faced and apologetic, muttering about misunderstandings and family feuds. He tried to drag her away with dignity intact, but Margaret was past caring about dignity. She screamed at me from the front door, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn where the neighbors had gathered to watch. You think you've won. You think this is over. I know things, Eleanor. Things about your father. About your mother. Things that will destroy you. I stood in the doorway, my cheeks still stinging, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Then tell them. I called back, loud enough for everyone to hear. Tell everyone. I'm not afraid of you anymore. The door slammed behind them. The house fell silent. I turned to face the roomful of strangers who'd come to watch my breakdown, and were now witness to my resurrection. Mrs. Lindholm was already making phone calls. Mrs. Patterson was crying into a handkerchief. The younger women were staring at me like I'd grown wings. And somewhere in my pocket my phone buzzed. I pulled it out, my hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. A text from an unknown number. I opened it and felt the blood drain from my face. I know what you're doing. Watch your back, Ellie. You've made a very powerful enemy. I didn't know who sent it. I didn't know how they knew my name. But as I stood in the wreckage of my aunt's carefully constructed lies, surrounded by whispers and stares and the lingering scent of her perfume, I realized that taking back my inheritance was only the first battle. The war had just begun. The phone buzzed again before I could even process the first message. Another text from the same unknown number. The pearls. Check the pearls. My stomach dropped. The pearls. My mother's pearls, the ones Margaret had been wearing at the funeral, the ones she'd claimed were safe in the bank vault. I'd seen them on her neck just yesterday, the creamy white beads glinting against her powder blue dress. I'd been too grief-stricken to say anything, too beaten down by months of her gaslighting and manipulation to trust my own memory. Not anymore did I locked myself in my father's study, the one room in the house that still smelled like him, like leather and old paper and the faint ghost of his cigars. My hands were shaking as I dialed Mr. Chen's number. He picked up on the second ring. Eleanor, I was just about to call you. The bank confirmed the freeze on all accounts, just as we discussed. There's more. I said, my voice breathless. My mother's pearls. I need to know if Margaret accessed the vault. There was a pause on the other end. I could hear him shuffling papers, the click of a keyboard. The safety deposit box in your mother's name hasn't been touched since her death, he said slowly. But there's a separate inventory filed from the estate sale. Your aunt requested an appraisal 3 weeks ago. For insurance purposes, she claimed. Did she return them? Another pause. Longer this time. Eleanor, I'm looking at the file now. The appraisal was completed, but there's no record of the items being returned to the vault. It says they were transferred to your aunt's personal care. With your signature. My blood went cold. I never signed anything. I know, he said quietly. I thought it was a clerical error, but if you're certain. I'm certain. He was silent for a long moment. Then we have a problem. Your signature is on the document. Someone forged it. And if she's done it with the pearls, she's done it with other assets. I'm going to need to examine every piece of paperwork from the last 6 months. This could take days. I looked at the clock on the mantelpiece. It was barely past 4 in the afternoon. The sun was still bright through the window, casting long shadows across my father's desk. Somewhere outside, I could hear the distant hum of a lawnmower, the normal sounds of a normal afternoon. Nothing about my life felt normal. I don't have days, I said. She's already talking to people. The neighbors, the bank, the trustees. Every hour she's out there, she's spinning this. Then I'll work through the night, Mr. Chin said. But Eleanor, I need to warn you. If she's been forging signatures, she's committed a crime. Multiple crimes. The moment we take this to the authorities, it becomes a legal battle. There's no coming back from that. She'll be charged, convicted, imprisoned. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Margaret's face when she'd slapped me. The ugly triumph in her eyes. The way she'd smiled at my father's funeral, already calculating how much the house was worth. Yes, I said. I'm prepared. I hung up and sat in the silence of the study, the phone warm in my hand. The unknown texter was still a mystery, but I had a feeling I knew who it was. Someone on Margaret's side. Someone trying to warn me, to scare me, to make me back down. But the text about the pearls had confirmed something important. Whoever it was, they knew about Margaret's crimes. They knew the evidence. And they were playing both sides, feeding me information while pretending to be my enemy. I pulled up the number, my thumb hovering over the call button. But I didn't call. Not yet. The message was a taunt, a game. If I responded too quickly, I'd show my hand. Better to wait, to let them wonder what I knew and what I'd do with it. That the front doorbell rang. And I heard the maid's footsteps in the hall. Voices murmured, and then the maid appeared in the study doorway, her face pale. Miss Eleanor, she said, her voice trembling. There are police officers here to see you. My heart seized. They'd come for Margaret. Mr. Chin must have called them already. But when I walked into the foyer, I saw the officers weren't looking at me with suspicion. They were looking at me with something far worse. Pity. Miss Eleanor Hayes, the officer at the front, a tall man with tired eyes and a badge, held up a piece of paper. We received a complaint this afternoon. An allegation of elder abuse and financial exploitation made against you by your aunt, Margaret Hayes Whitfield. The words hit me like a second slap. Margaret. The police. She'd beaten me to it. While I'd been inside, making calls and gathering evidence, she'd been on her own phone, spinning a story so twisted that even the law had swallowed it whole. That's ridiculous, I said, but my voice came out weak. She's the one who's been stealing from me. I have proof. I can show you. We'll need to see that proof, ma'am, the officer said, his tone professionally neutral. But right now, we've received sworn statements from 3 witnesses who claim you threatened your aunt earlier this afternoon. Physical violence was mentioned. Slapping specifically. She slapped me. I pointed at my cheek, still red and sore from Margaret's hand. She hit me in front of everyone. Mrs. Lindholm saw it. Mrs. Patterson saw it. They'll tell you. Mrs. Lindholm stepped forward from somewhere behind me, her face grim. I saw Margaret strike the girl, she said, her voice carrying the weight of her years on the bench. I was ready to call you myself, before that woman made her own accusations. She's doing this to retaliate. To silence her. The officer looked from Mrs. Lindholm's stern face to my bruised cheek. Something flickered in his expression. "We'll need to take statements from all parties," he said slowly. But my supervisor received the complaint directly from a legal representative of Mrs. Whitfield. "He's asked that we escort you to the station for questioning. Just to clear things up, ma'am." Escort me to the station. That was police code for arrest without arrest. They couldn't charge me yet, not without evidence, but they could inconvenience me, humiliate me, drag my name through the mud while Margaret's lawyers built their case. In my first life, I'd crumbled under this exact pressure. I'd been too weak to fight back, too confused and frightened to see the trap she was laying at this time. I had something I didn't have before. A secret weapon I'd been too scared to use. I looked at the officers, then at Mrs. Lindholm, then at the unknown texter's number still glowing on my phone screen. And I made a decision. "I'll come with you," I said calmly. "But before I do, I'd like to call my lawyer. And I'd like to submit an item of evidence for safekeeping." I walked to the foyer table, pulled open the drawer, and took out the velvet box I'd hidden there that morning. The moment I'd woken up, the moment I'd remembered everything, I'd gone straight to Margaret's room and found it. My mother's pearls. She'd taken them out of the vault after forging my signature, and she'd been keeping them in her jewelry case, right next to the emerald earrings she'd stolen from my grandmother's estate. I held the box out to the officer. "These are my mother's pearls," I said. "My aunt forged my signature to take them from the safety deposit box. I want them logged as evidence in the case against her." The officer took the box, his expression shifting from professional neutrality to something closer to unease. He opened it, looked at the pearls gleaming in the afternoon light, and closed it again. "Ma'am, are you sure?" "Positive," I said. "And I want the chain of custody documented. Every officer who touches this box signs a log. I'm not letting them disappear the way everything else has." The younger officer, who'd been silent until now, shifted his weight uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe we should wait for the detective. This is getting complicated." The tall officer nodded slowly. "You're right. Miss Hayes, I'm going to ask you to remain on the premises until we can get a detective here. No escort to the station. For now." He shot a look at the younger officer that said more than words. Someone in the department had received a phone call they weren't happy about. Someone had been pushed to make this arrest without proper evidence, and it was starting to smell like a setup. Margaret's gamble had backfired. She'd wanted to use the police to discredit me, to make me seem unstable and dangerous. But Mrs. Lindholm's testimony and the physical evidence of the pearls had painted a very different picture. The question was, how far was Margaret willing to go to keep her secrets buried? My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. This time the message was shorter. "You're smarter than she thought. But the house isn't safe. Check the north wing. The walls are thinner than you remember." I looked up at the officer, then at the staircase leading to the second floor. The north wing. My mother's room. The one I'd been too afraid to enter since her death. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. What had Margaret hidden there? What was waiting for me behind the walls I'd been so careful to avoid? The detective was on his way. I had maybe 20 minutes before my house was swarming with investigators. 20 minutes to find whatever Margaret had buried in my mother's room. 20 minutes to unlock the next piece of a puzzle that was growing larger and more dangerous with every passing hour. I excused myself, muttering something about needing to use the restroom. The officer nodded, distracted by his phone, which was now buzzing with an incoming call from his supervisor. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding in my throat. The message from the unknown texter burning in my pocket that the north wing was dark, the curtains drawn, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of lavender. My mother's perfume. The one Margaret had never been able to replicate. I walked to the far wall, the one that connected to the servants' quarters, and pressed my ear against it. The wallpaper was old, floral, faded by years of sunlight Margaret had never let in. And then I heard it. A faint scratch. A whisper. A voice from inside the wall, muffled and desperate. "Help me. Please help me." I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my mouth. There was someone inside the wall. Someone alive. Someone Margaret had hidden away. And as I stared at the floral wallpaper, my fingers shaking, I realized the voice was coming from directly behind my mother's portrait. The one Margaret had insisted on keeping when everything else was sold, the one she'd never let me touch. I pressed my ear to the wall again, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The voice was still there, a faint rasping sound that barely penetrated the old plaster. "Please," it whispered. She locked me in. "I can't get out." My mother's portrait stared down at me from its gilded frame, her eyes soft and warm in the fading light. I'd avoided this room for 3 years. 3 years of grief and guilt, and the creeping suspicion that something was terribly wrong. Now I knew I'd been right to be afraid. I just hadn't known what I was afraid of. "Who are you?" I whispered back, pressing my lips to the wallpaper. "How did you get in there?" The voice on the other side of the wall was silent for a moment, and I heard a faint sob. "It's Anita. Your mother's maid. She said she'd kill me if I told anyone. She said she'd make it look like an accident." Anita. I remembered her. A quiet woman with kind eyes who'd worked for my mother for years. She disappeared a few months after my mother died, and Margaret had told me she'd quit, moved back to her home country to be with her family. I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? I'd believed everything Margaret told me. "Is there a door?" I asked, running my hands over the wallpaper, looking for any sign of a seam or a hidden panel. "How did she get you in there?" "There's a passage behind the wardrobe," Anita said, her voice growing stronger now, desperate and afraid. "But she bricked it up after she put me in. I've been trapped for months. She brings me food and water, just enough to keep me alive. She says if I behave she'll let me out, but she never does. She just laughs." Rage flooded through me, hot and blinding. Margaret hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She'd imprisoned a human being in my own house, in the walls of my mother's room. And she'd done it while I was sleeping in the next wing, oblivious and trusting. I was a fool. A blind, stupid fool that I pulled the wardrobe open. The doors groaning on rusted hinges. It was empty, stripped of my mother's clothes and shoes, just a hollow shell of dark wood. I pushed against the back panel, and it shifted slightly. There was a space behind it, a narrow crawlway that led into the wall. I could see the faint outline of a doorframe, sealed with fresh mortar. "Anita, I'm going to get you out," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to find something to break through this wall. Just hold on." I ran to my father's study, my bare feet slapping against the marble floors. I grabbed a hammer from his old tool chest, the one he'd kept in the corner for fixing picture frames and loose hinges. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The voice from the north wing was still echoing in my ears, that desperate plea for help that had been going unanswered for months. When I reached the portrait again, I didn't hesitate. I swung the hammer at the wall, and the old plaster crumbled under the impact. The floral wallpaper tore, revealing rough brick behind it. I swung again and again, the hammer connecting with the mortar until the bricks began to loosen. Dust filled the air, choking me, but I kept going. I could hear Anita crying on the other side, her voice rising with every blow. "What are you doing in there?" a voice called from downstairs. The officer, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. "Miss Hayes, you need to stay where we can see you." I ignored him, pulling the loose bricks free with my bare hands, ignoring the sharp edges that cut into my fingers. The hole in the wall was widening, and I could see the faint outline of a figure huddled on the other side. "Anita, I'm almost there." The officer burst through the door just as I pulled the last brick free. The gap was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through, and I saw Anita's face emerge from the darkness, her skin pale, her eyes hollow, her hair matted and filthy. She reached for me with trembling hands, and I pulled her through the hole, dragging her into the light of the room. She collapsed against me, sobbing. "I thought I was going to die in there," she whispered. "I thought no one would ever find me." The officer stood frozen in the doorway, his hand on his radio, his face a mask of shock. "What the hell is going on here? Who is this woman?" "This is Anita," I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. "She was my mother's maid. My Aunt Margaret locked her in this wall and left her to die. She's been in there for months." The officer stared at the hole in the wall, the pile of broken bricks, the emaciated woman clinging to me like I was the only solid thing in a world that had turned upside down. He raised his radio to his lips, his voice rough. Dispatch, I need a medical unit and backup at this location. I've got a victim of false imprisonment. Possible kidnapping. We need detectives and we need them now. Anita was shaking uncontrollably, and I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. It's okay, I said over and over. It's okay. You're safe now. I'm not going to let her hurt you again. Anita pulled back, her eyes wild and desperate. You don't understand, she gasped. She's not just stealing your money. She's hiding something bigger. Something that could destroy the whole family. I found it. That's why she put me in there. I found the evidence, and she caught me looking. I felt my blood run cold. Found what? What are you talking about? Anita's hand trembled as she reached into her pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. Your mother's will, she whispered. The real one. Your aunt destroyed the first version, but your mother made a second one. She gave it to me. She told me to hide it, to keep it safe. She said she didn't trust Margaret. I took the paper with shaking hands, unfolding it carefully. The words swam before my eyes, but I forced myself to read them. My mother's handwriting. I knew it intimately, the flow of her letters, the way she dotted her I's with a little circle. The will was dated 6 months before her death, and it named me as the sole heir to everything. Not Margaret. Not the trust. Everything. The house. The accounts. The jewelry. All of it. But it was the second page that made my heart stop. A codicil, handwritten and signed by my mother, that gave Margaret $1. A symbolic gesture, the kind that said she hadn't forgotten her sister. But the codicil was clear. Margaret was not to be trusted with the estate. She was not to be given any authority. And if she contested the will, she was to be investigated for fraud and possible involvement in my mother's death. Involvement. In my mother's death. Anita was crying. Her sobs muffled against my shoulder. Your mother was sick, but she wasn't dying. The doctors said she was improving. And then Margaret came to visit her. And the next day she was gone. I think she did something. I think she poisoned her. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I staggered, clutching the wall for support. My mother's death had been sudden, unexpected, and everyone had accepted it as a tragic accident. The heart failure the doctors had diagnosed, the grief of losing her husband, the stress of managing the estate on her own. But now I knew. It hadn't been an accident. It had been murdered. Call Mr. Chan, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Tell him we need to file a police report. Tell him it's not just fraud anymore. It's murder. The officer was already on his radio, barking orders, summoning every available unit. The detective who'd been on his way was now racing toward the house with a very different purpose. I looked at the hole in the wall, at the dark passage where Anita had been trapped for months, and I felt something shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it was quieter now, buried beneath a rage so pure it burned at a new message on my phone. Unknown number again. You found her. Good. But Margaret knows you know now. And she's not coming alone. I looked up, my heart pounding. And then I heard it. The sound of car engines in the driveway. Multiple cars. Multiple people. And at the front of the convoy, my aunt's silver sedan, pulling up to the house with a screech of tires that she'd come back. And she'd brought reinforcements. I gripped the will in my hand. The evidence of my mother's betrayal and her murder. Anita was clinging to me, her eyes wide with terror. The officers were moving into defensive positions. And somewhere outside, my aunt was preparing to make her final stand. She didn't know I'd found the truth. She didn't know I had proof. And she didn't know that this time, I was ready to fight back with everything I had. The front door slammed open, and I heard Margaret's voice, shrill and frantic. Where is she? Where is that ungrateful child? I'm here to take back what's mine. I walked to the top of the stairs, the will clutched in my hand, the walls of my mother's room still crumbling behind me. You should have stayed away, Aunt Margaret. I called down, my voice carrying across the marble foyer. You should have run while you still could. Because now it's over. And I have the proof. Margaret froze at the bottom of the stairs, her face a mask of fury and fear. Behind her, 3 men in dark suits crowded the foyer, their eyes scanning the house like predators assessing their prey. I recognized one of them, Thomas Whitfield, Margaret's husband, The man who dragged her out of here less than 2 hours ago. The other two were strangers, but they moved with the kind of practiced ease that suggested they'd done this before. Muscle. She'd brought muscle. Eleanor, you foolish girl, Margaret spat, her voice shaking with barely contained rage. You have no idea what you've done. No idea what you've unleashed. I stood my ground at the top of the stairs, the will still clutched in my hand. Behind me, I could hear the officer's radio crackling with incoming chatter, the sound of sirens growing closer. Backup was coming. I just had to hold on long enough for them to get here. Unleashed, I repeated, my voice calm despite the pounding of my heart. You mean the truth, Margaret? The truth about the forged signatures, the truth about the woman you locked in the walls, the truth about how my mother really died. Margaret's face went white. The color drained from her cheeks so quickly I thought she might collapse. Thomas stepped forward, his hand raised as if to calm her. Eleanor, let's not be hasty. We can work this out. There's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I laughed, and the sound was hollow, bitter. You think you can talk your way out of this? I have her will. The real one. The one you destroyed. And I have Anita, who's going to tell the police everything she saw. The two men in suits exchanged glances. One of them reached into his jacket, and I saw the glint of metal. A gun. He was carrying a gun. The officer in my mother's room must have seen it too, because he stepped forward, his hand on his own weapon. Everyone stay calm, he said, his voice steady but tense. I've already called for backup. You're not getting out of here. Thomas laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. This is a family matter. We don't need the police involved. You locked a woman in a wall. The officer shot back. That's not a family matter. That's a felony. Margaret's composure cracked. She pushed past Thomas, her heels clicking against the marble floor as she climbed the first few steps. You think you've won, Eleanor? You think a piece of paper and a hysterical maid are going to stop me? I'm the one who's been running this family for years. I'm the one who kept everything together while you were crying in your room like a pathetic child. I felt the rage surge through me, hot and blinding. But I forced myself to stay calm, to think clearly. She was baiting me, trying to provoke a reaction that would make me seem unstable. It was what she'd always done, what she'd perfected over years of manipulation. Not this time. I'm not a child anymore, Margaret, I said quietly. And I'm not crying. I'm done crying. I'm done being afraid. And I'm done letting you get away with murder. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and damning. Margaret's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in their depths. Fear. Real genuine fear. She'd never expected me to find out. She'd never expected me to fight back. You can't prove anything, she hissed, but her voice was shaking. You can't prove a thing. The will, I said, holding up the yellowed paper. The codicil that names you as a suspect in my mother's death. The testimony of a witness who saw you with a bottle of pills the night my mother died. The forensic evidence that's going to be found when they exhume her body. It was a bluff, a desperate one. I had no idea if they could exhume my mother's body, if there was anything left to find after all these years. But I watched Margaret's face crumble and knew I'd hit something real. Thomas grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. Margaret, what is she talking about? What did you do? It was an accident. Margaret shrieked, wrenching free of his grip. It was supposed to be medicine, just to help her sleep, just to calm her down. The dosage was too high. The doctor said it was too high, but she wouldn't listen. She kept fighting me, kept trying to change the will, kept trying to cut me out. So I helped her along. I helped her stop fighting. The confession hung in the air, stark and damning. Thomas stared at her like he'd never seen her before. One of the suits stepped back, his hand dropping from his jacket. Even the muscle knew when they were on the wrong side. She was my mother, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She was kind and she was generous and she trusted you. And you killed her. Margaret's face twisted, the mask of composure finally shattering into something ugly and desperate. She was weak. Just like you. Weak and sentimental, and she was going to throw everything away on charity and stupid causes. I was saving this family. I was protecting our legacy. Your legacy, I repeated, and I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. There's no legacy, Margaret. There's just a pile of lies and stolen money and the body of my mother. You didn't protect anything. You destroyed everything." The front door crashed open, and the foyer flooded with police officers, their weapons drawn. The suits raised their hands immediately, and Thomas followed suit, his face pale and sweating. Margaret stood frozen at the foot of the stairs, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "Everyone down on the ground!" the lead officer shouted, and the suits dropped to their knees, their hands behind their heads. Thomas followed, his body trembling. But Margaret didn't move. She stood there, staring up at me, her eyes burning with hatred. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won, but you haven't. There are things you don't know. Secrets that are going to destroy you. Secrets I've kept safe for years." I walked down the stairs slowly, the will still in my hand, the evidence of her crimes against my chest. Anita was behind me, clutching my arm, her body trembling. I stopped when I was face to face with Margaret, close enough to see the veins pulsing in her throat. "Tell me," I said quietly. "Tell me all of it. I'm not afraid of your secrets anymore." Margaret's lips curled into a smile, cold and cruel. "Your father knew," she whispered. "He knew about the affair. He knew she was planning to leave him. That's why he wrote you out of the first will. That's why he gave me control of everything. He didn't trust you. He never did." I felt the words hit me like a physical blow. My father. The affair. The will. I'd never known any of this. In my first life, I'd died believing my father loved me, that he'd trusted me to handle his estate. But Margaret was telling me something else entirely, something that cut to the bone. "You're lying," I said, but my voice wavered. "She was going to leave him for another man," Margaret continued, her smile widening. "Your perfect mother, the saint everyone mourned. She was going to walk away from everything. Take you with her, leave your father broken and humiliated. He found out. He was going to disinherit her, leave her with nothing. But then she died, and he changed his mind. He couldn't stand to lose both of you. So he rewrote the will. He gave you everything." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "You're trying to confuse me. You're trying to make me doubt everything." "I don't need to try," Margaret said, her voice dripping with contempt. "I've been watching you, Eleanor. I've been watching you fall apart every time you learn something new. The truth is too much for you. It's always been too much for you." The officers moved in, grabbing Margaret's arms and pulling her back. She went willingly, her smile still fixed on her face, her eyes never leaving mine. "You think you're so strong," she said as they dragged her toward the door. "You think you've won. But you've just opened a box you can't close. And everything that comes out of it is going to destroy you." She was right. I felt it in my bones. The truth about my mother, my father. The secrets buried deep in our family's history. I'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. And the next enemy wasn't Margaret. It was the truth that I watched them take her away. The police cars filling the driveway. The neighbors gathering on the lawn to watch the spectacle. Anita was sobbing behind me, her body racked with relief and exhaustion. Thomas was being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of shock. The suits were gone, probably already lawyering up. And I was standing in the middle of my mother's house, surrounded by the wreckage of my aunt's lies, holding a piece of paper that had changed everything. My phone buzzed again. I looked at it with dread. "Unknown number. She told you about your mother. Now you know why I've been helping you. But there's more. So much more. Come to the old house tomorrow. Alone. I'll tell you the rest." I stared at the message, my mind racing. The old house. My grandmother's house, the one that had been abandoned for years. The one Margaret had refused to sell despite its prime location. I'd never understood why she'd held on to it, why she'd let it rot when it could have been sold for millions. Now I was starting to understand. There was something there. Something Margaret had been protecting. Something that could destroy me if I wasn't careful. But I had to know. I couldn't turn back now. I'd come too far, lost too much. And there were still too many secrets buried in the wreckage of my family. I had to find out what Margaret had been hiding. I had to find out who was helping me. And I had to figure out what the truth was really going to cost. Anita touched my arm, her hand warm and trembling. "Miss Eleanor," she whispered. "There's something else. Something I didn't tell you. Your mother, before she died. She told me about the old house. She said there were letters. Letters from her lover. Letters that proved what she was planning to do. Margaret found them first. She's been hiding them all these years. And if they get out, the scandal will destroy your father's name. It'll destroy everything. I looked at her, at the fear and exhaustion in her eyes. And I felt a cold certainty settle in my chest. The letters were the key. The one thing Margaret had been protecting with all her schemes and lies. If I could find them, I could control the narrative. I could decide what the world knew about my parents. But if Margaret's allies got to them first, everything I'd just built would crumble. Where are they? I asked. Where did she hide them? Anita shook her head. I don't know. She moved them after I found the will. She knew I was looking. She knew I was getting close. She locked me up before I could find them again. I looked at the phone in my hand. The message glowing in the darkness. The old house. Tomorrow. Alone. It was a trap. It had to be a trap. But it was also my only chance. The only way to get ahead of the secrets that were threatening to consume me. I turned to the officer, my voice steady. I need to go to my grandmother's house. There's evidence there. Evidence that could prove everything. The officer looked at me, his face skeptical. Ma'am, with respect, you've been through a lot tonight. Maybe it's better if you let us handle the investigation. I'm not asking for permission, I said, and I heard my mother's voice in my words, fierce and determined. I'm going there. You can follow me, you can arrest me, but I'm not letting Margaret destroy one more thing in my life. The officer opened his mouth to argue, but Anita cut him off. She's right, she said quietly. I saw the letters. I saw what was in them. If Margaret's allies find them first, they'll use them to discredit everything. They'll make Eleanor look like the criminal. They'll make her look like the one who betrayed her family. The officer was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I'll have a unit escort you, he said. But I'm coming with you. And if there's anything dangerous in that house, you let us handle it. Understand? I nodded, relief flooding through me. Understood. I grabbed my coat from the hall closet and slipped it on over my silk pajamas. My hands were still shaking, my heart still pounding, but there was a new strength in my legs, a new determination in my chest. I was going to the old house. I was going to find the letters. And I was going to confront whatever truth had been waiting for me all these years. The drive was short, just 15 minutes through the winding streets of the old neighborhood. The house loomed out of the darkness as we approached, a crumbling Victorian that had been abandoned for decades. The windows were dark, the porch sagging, the garden overgrown with weeds. It looked haunted, the kind of house you'd warn children to stay away from. But I knew it wasn't haunted. It was just full of secrets. My family's secrets. And it was time to uncover every single one. The officers fanned out around the house, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. I walked up the steps to the front door, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. It was unlocked. The door swung open with a groan, revealing a dark foyer thick with dust and the smell of decay. I stepped inside, my heart pounding in my ears. And then I heard it. A voice soft and familiar. Eleanor. You came. I froze. The voice was coming from the darkness at the top of the stairs. A figure stepped forward, and I recognized the silhouette. My breath caught in my throat. It was my father. The word caught in my throat, a strangled sound that barely escaped my lips. My father's silhouette stood at the top of the stairs, familiar and impossible, a ghost I'd buried 3 years ago. I felt the world tilt beneath me, the floor shifting like sand. The officers behind me were moving, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, but I couldn't hear their voices. I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my own heart. Dad, I whispered again, my voice breaking. No. No, you're dead. I watched you die. I was at your funeral. The figure descended the stairs slowly, each step creaking under his weight. As he moved into the faint light filtering through the grime-caked windows, I saw his face clearly for the first time. Older. Weathered. His hair was streaked with gray, and there was a deep scar running down his cheek that I'd never seen before. But it was him. It was unmistakably him. Eleanor, he said again, and his voice was rough, strained, like he'd been crying or screaming or both. I know what you must be thinking. But I need you to listen to me. I need you to understand. Understand what? I took a step backward, my hand reaching blindly for the doorframe behind me. You faked your own death, you let me grieve, you let Margaret destroy everything, and what you just watched. Eleanor, please, don't. I shouted, and my voice echoed through the empty house, bouncing off the walls like a trapped bird. Don't you dare ask me to be calm. I've been living in hell for 3 years. 3 years, Dad. She took everything. She broke me. And you were here the whole time. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. The flashlights of the officers were trained on him now, and I could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their fingers hovered over their weapons. Put your hands where we can see them, one of them barked. Identify yourself. It's okay, I said, my voice flat. He's my father. The officers exchanged glances, confusion and suspicion flickering across their faces. The lead officer stepped forward, his voice cautious. Ma'am, are you telling me your deceased father is standing in front of us right now? I looked at my father, at the lines etched into his face, the shadows under his eyes, the tremor in his hands. He looked like a man who'd been running for a very long time. I don't know what I'm telling you, I said honestly. I don't know anything anymore. My father took a hesitant step toward me, and I flinched. He stopped immediately, his face crumpling with pain. I'm sorry, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry, Ellie. I never wanted this. I never wanted you to find out like this. Then why did you ask me to come here? I demanded, the anger building in my chest again. Why did you send me those messages? Why didn't you just come to me? Why did you make me go through all of this alone? He shook his head, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I didn't send you any messages. I've been here, Ellie. I've been hiding, waiting for the right moment. But I didn't send you anything. I didn't contact you at all. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. If he hadn't been texting me, then who had? Who had been feeding me information, leading me to Anita, telling me to come to this house? I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and held up the screen. Then who sent these? My father squinted at the glowing screen, his face going pale. I don't know, he said slowly. But whoever it is, they knew I was here. They knew I was waiting for you. I felt the walls of the house closing in around me, the weight of 1,000 secrets pressing down on my shoulders. Someone had been playing me. Someone had been leading me through this maze of lies and betrayals, guiding me toward the truth while keeping their own identity hidden. And now I was standing in my grandmother's abandoned house, face to face with my supposedly dead father. And I had no idea who I could trust. The lead officer stepped forward, his voice careful. Mr. Hayes, I'm going to need you to tell me exactly what happened. Why did you fake your death? Who was involved? My father's shoulders sagged, and for a moment, he looked every bit the broken man he appeared to be. I didn't fake my death, he said quietly. I was attacked. Someone tried to kill me. And I survived. But I couldn't go home. I couldn't let anyone know I was alive. Not until I knew who was responsible. Attacked, I repeated, my mind racing. By who? Who would want to kill you? He looked at me, and the anguish in his eyes cut me to the bone. I don't know for sure, he said. But I have my suspicions. And I think it was tied to your mother's death. I think the same person who killed her tried to kill me. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the bottom step of the stairs, my head spinning. My mother's death. My father's attack. Margaret's confession. It was all connected. A web of murder and betrayal that had been spinning for years. And I was caught in the middle of it. Margaret, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She admitted to killing Mom. She said she did it to keep her from leaving you. My father's face went pale. She told you that? She told me a lot of things, I said, the bitterness creeping back into my voice. She told me about the affair. She told me Mom was planning to leave you. She told me you knew about it. He closed his eyes, a pained expression crossing his face. I knew, he admitted, his voice low. I knew about the affair. Your mother told me herself. She was unhappy, Ellie. She was going to leave. But she didn't want to hurt you. She wanted to take you with her. Start a new life somewhere far away from everything. And you couldn't let that happen. I said, the pieces starting to fall into place. So you tried to stop her. You threatened to cut her off, to disinherit her. He nodded slowly. I was angry. I was humiliated. I said terrible things. And then she died. And I thought she'd killed herself. I thought my words had pushed her over the edge. I carried that guilt with me for years. It was only after I was attacked that I started to realize the truth. Which is my father looked up at me, his eyes burning with intensity. Your mother didn't kill herself. She was murdered. By someone who wanted to make it look like suicide. Someone who knew about the affair, and used it to cover their tracks. And when I started investigating, they tried to silence me too. But Margaret confessed. I said, desperate to hold on to something solid. She said she gave her medicine. She said she knew the dosage was too high. Margaret is a liar, my father said flatly. She's always been a liar. She told you what she thought you needed to hear to break you. But the truth is, she wasn't the one who killed your mother. She was just a pawn. A greedy, stupid pawn who got caught up in something much bigger than she ever imagined. I stared at him, my mind reeling. Then who killed her? He looked at me, and I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I'd seen in Margaret's face when she realized I had the will. I don't know, he said. I've been trying to find out for years. But every time I get close, something happens. Someone threatens me. Someone tries to stop me. I've been in hiding because I'm not strong enough to fight them alone. But you, Ellie, you've already done what I couldn't. You've exposed Margaret. You've found the will. You've started the investigation. Now I need you to finish it. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him I was just a scared girl who'd been manipulated by her aunt, who'd stumbled into this nightmare by accident. But the truth was I wasn't that girl anymore.
Ide fa sa Margaret.
I'd found Anita. I'd stood in the middle of my mother's room and uncovered a conspiracy that had been buried for years. I couldn't turn back now. I couldn't pretend I didn't know. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice hoarse. My father reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key tarnished with age. There's a safe in your grandmother's bedroom, he said. Behind the portrait of her father. Your mother left something there. Something she was planning to use as leverage if things got bad. I think it's the key to everything. I took the key from his trembling fingers, feeling its weight in my palm. What's in it? I don't know, he admitted. I've never been able to open it. I don't have the combination. But your mother left a letter with the safe, hidden in the back of her diary. She said the combination was something only you would know. Something between you and her. My mind raced, trying to think of what that could be. My mother and I had shared 1,000 secrets, 1,000 private moments. I thought of the lullabies she used to sing to me, the bedtime stories she'd tell, the way she'd kiss my forehead before I fell asleep. And then I remembered. The birthday she'd forgotten. The one where I'd been so upset, and she'd promised to make it up to me. She'd given me a password for a special treasure hunt. A game we'd played together. The password had been the name of my first pet, a silly little goldfish I'd loved when I was 5. Goldie, I whispered. The combination is Goldie. I raced up the stairs, my father and the officers following close behind. The second floor of the old house was dark and musty, the furniture draped in white sheets like ghosts. I pushed open the door to my grandmother's bedroom and crossed to the portrait of my great-grandfather, a stern-looking man with a heavy beard and dark eyes. I pulled the frame aside and there it was. A small safe set into the wall, its dial gleaming in the darkness. My fingers trembled as I spun the dial. For letters.
GOLDIE.
The lock clicked open and I pulled the handle, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age. And inside the envelope was a letter, written in my mother's hand. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the page, my heart pounding in my chest. My dearest Ellie, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you the truth while I was alive. There are things I've done, things I've hidden, things I'm not proud of. But I need you to know that I loved you. I loved you more than anything in this world. That I know you've heard rumors about me. About the affair, about my plans to leave your father. They're all true. I was unhappy, and I made terrible choices. I was going to leave, and I was going to take you with me. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really protecting myself. I was trying to escape, and I was willing to break your heart to do it. But there's something else. Something I never told anyone. The man I was going to leave your father for was not who he claimed to be. I found out too late that he was using me. He was trying to get close to the family, to gain access to your father's business, to destroy everything we'd built. I didn't know until it was too late, and by then I was trapped out. I broke it off. I told him I was staying with your father, that I was going to make things right. But he didn't take it well. He threatened me. He said he would destroy us both. And then he said something else. He said he'd been watching you, that he knew your routine, that he could get to you anytime he wanted. I was so scared, Ellie. I didn't know what to do. I wrote this letter hoping I'd never have to give it to you, hoping I could find a way to keep you safe without telling you the truth. But if I'm gone, then I failed. And I need you to know who you're up against. His name is Victor Chun. He's your father's business partner. And he's the man who killed me. I dropped the letter, my hands shaking so violently I could barely breathe. Victor Chun, the man who'd been handling my legal affairs. The man who'd been helping me fight Margaret. The man I trusted with everything. The man who'd been playing me all along. Ellie, my father's voice came from behind me, urgent and worried. What does it say? Who was it? I looked up at him, my vision blurring with tears. It was Mr. Chun, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He killed Mom. He's been working with Margaret this whole time. And he's the one who's been sending me those texts. He's been leading me here. He's been leading me into a trap. My phone buzzed in my hand and I looked down at the screen. Unknown number. A single word. Boo. The text message stared up at me from the screen. That single word burning into my retinas. Boo. Like it was all a game. Like my mother's death, my father's disappearance, my entire life being torn apart was just entertainment for someone who'd been pulling strings from the shadows. That my father saw my face and stepped closer, his hand reaching for my arm. Ellie, what is it? What's wrong? Mr. Chun, I said, my voice hollow. He's been texting me. He's the one who told me to come here. He knew you were waiting. He knew about the safe. He wanted me to find this letter. The officers exchanged glances, their hands moving to their weapons. The lead officer spoke into his radio, his voice tight with urgency. Dispatch, we need immediate backup at the Old Hayes property. Suspect may be en route. Repeat, suspect may be en route. I looked at the letter in my hands, my mother's words still echoing in my mind. Victor Chun, the man who'd been my lawyer, my advisor, my supposed ally. He'd been working with Margaret all along. He'd been using me to get to my father, to get to the evidence, to cover his tracks. And I'd played right into his hands. Dad, we need to get out of here, I said, grabbing his arm. He's coming. He's been planning this for years. He's not going to let us walk away. My father shook his head, his jaw set with determination. I've been running for too long, Ellie. I'm not running anymore. He wants a confrontation. He's going to get one. Dad, listen to me, he said, gripping my shoulders and forcing me to meet his eyes. I've spent the last 3 years hiding in the shadows, watching from a distance, too afraid to fight back. I let Margaret destroy you. I let Chun manipulate you. I let my own daughter suffer because I was too scared to face the truth. I'm not making that mistake again. Before I could argue, the front door of the old house slammed open downstairs. Heavy footsteps echoed through the foyer, the sound of multiple people entering the building. I heard a voice I recognized, smooth and professional, utterly devoid of warmth. Eleanor, I know you're up there. I saw your car outside. There's no point in hiding. Mr. He'd come for us. The officers moved into defensive positions, their weapons drawn. The lead officer signaled for me and my father to stay behind him, his voice low and steady. We'll handle this, ma'am. Just stay calm and stay behind us. But I couldn't stay calm. I couldn't stay behind anyone. This was my fight. My mother's killer. My father's would-be murderer. The man who'd been orchestrating everything from the shadows, playing me like a puppet on a string. I pushed past the officer, my hands shaking, the letter clutched in my fist. Chun. I shouted down the stairs, my voice echoing through the old house. I know everything. I know about my mother. I know about my father. I know you've been working with Margaret this whole time. There was a pause and then I heard his voice again, cold and amused. Do you now? That's very impressive, Eleanor. You've always been more clever than your aunt gave you credit for. But I'm afraid knowing isn't the same as proving. And proving isn't the same as surviving. I heard the sound of a gun being cocked, and my blood went cold. He had weapons. Of course he had weapons. He'd come prepared to kill, just like he'd killed my mother. "Mr. Chun, this is the police," the lead officer shouted down the stairs. "We have you surrounded. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up." "Oh, I don't think so," Chun replied, his voice still infuriatingly calm. "You see, I've been planning this moment for a very long time. I'm not going to let a few police officers stand in my way. Not when I'm so close to finally getting what I deserve." "What you deserve," I shouted back, the rage boiling over inside me. "You killed my mother. You tried to kill my father. You stole my inheritance and you manipulated me for years. What could you possibly deserve?" Chun laughed, a cold, hollow sound that sent chills down my spine. "Your mother was a liability. She knew too much. And she was about to expose everything. I had to silence her. Your father was the same. He was getting too close to the truth. And you, Eleanor, you were just a pawn. A useful, predictable pawn who would do exactly what I needed her to do." "Except I didn't," I said, my voice sharp. "I found Anita. I found the will. I found this letter. And now I'm going to take you down. Every single piece of evidence is going to be used against you. You're going to rot in prison for the rest of your life." Chun was silent for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was different. Darker. More dangerous. "You think that letter is the only thing I've been hiding. You think I don't have contingencies. You think I haven't been watching you this whole time, Eleanor. I know everything about you. I know your fears. I know your weaknesses. I know exactly what it takes to break you." My father stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "You're not going to touch her. You're not going to touch anyone ever again. And who's going to stop me?" Chin's voice was mocking now. "You, Henry, the man who's been hiding in the shadows for 3 years, the man who abandoned his own daughter to her fate. You couldn't stop me before. And you can't stop me now." I heard the creak of footsteps on the stairs, and I knew he was coming up. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. But I forced myself to stay calm. I had to think. I had to stay one step ahead of him. "Dad, give me your phone," I whispered. "I have an idea." He looked at me, confusion in his eyes, but he handed it over without question. I typed furiously, sending a message to the only person I could think of who might be able to help. The person who'd been sending me messages all along. The person who'd been playing both sides. If anyone knew how to stop Chan, it was the person who'd been manipulating him just as much as he'd been manipulating me. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I saw the outline of his figure appearing at the top of the stairs, his silhouette tall and menacing in the darkness. He was holding a gun, its metal glinting in the faint light. "Eleanor," he said, his voice almost gentle now. "It's time to end this. Come with me and I'll make sure no one else gets hurt. Stay and I'll have to do something we'll all regret." I stepped forward, my hands raised in surrender. My father grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back, but I shook him off. "It's okay, Dad," I said quietly. "I know what I'm doing." Chan smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "That's my girl. I always knew you were the smart one." I walked toward him, my heart pounding in my ears. The officers behind me were shouting, telling me to stop, but I ignored them. I was close enough now to see the details of his face, the lines etched around his eyes, the cold calculation in his gaze. "I have a question," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through my veins. "Before you do whatever you're planning to do, I want to know one thing." Chin raised an eyebrow. "And what's that? Why did you send me those texts? Why did you lead me to Anita? Why did you help me find the evidence that was going to destroy you?" Chun's smile widened. "Because I needed you to find everything," he said. "I needed you to expose Margaret, to bring the police here, to gather all the evidence in one place. It's much easier to destroy everything when it's all in a single location." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just here to kill us. He was here to destroy everything. The letters, the will, the evidence. Everything that could tie him to my mother's death. "You're going to burn the house down," I said, the realization dawning on me. "You're going to destroy all the evidence." "Very good, Eleanor," Chin said, his voice almost admiring. "I knew you'd figure it out. But I'm afraid it's too late. I've already set the charges. In a few minutes, this house is going to be nothing but ash. And the world will never know the truth about what really happened to your mother. I felt the rage building inside me, hot and blinding. My mother. My father. My entire life. He was going to take it all away. Just like Margaret had tried to take my inheritance. Just like he'd taken my mother's life. No, I said, my voice low and fierce. I'm not going to let you do that. Chun laughed. And how are you going to stop me, little girl? You're unarmed. Your police officers are outnumbered. And your father is too weak to do anything. The only thing you have left is your anger, and anger isn't going to save you. I smiled, a cold, hard smile that I didn't recognize. You're right. Anger isn't going to save me. But something else will. I stepped closer to him, close enough to see the confusion flicker in his eyes. And then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, holding it up so he could see the screen. On it was a message I'd just sent. A message to the police chief, the district attorney, and every news outlet in the city. A message that contained the full contents of my mother's letter, along with every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past few hours. It's too late, Chin, I said, my voice ringing through the empty house. I've already sent everything to the authorities. The letter, the will, Anita's testimony. It's all out there now. Even if you destroy this house, you can't destroy the truth. Everyone is going to know what you did. Chun's face went white, the color draining from his cheeks like water from a broken glass. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw real fear in his eyes. The fear of a man who just realized he'd lost everything. You're lying, he said, but his voice was shaking. You don't have that kind of power. You're just a scared little girl playing games. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere deep inside me. You're right. I am just a scared little girl. But I'm also the girl who just brought down your entire operation. And I'm the girl who's going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in prison for what you did to my family. Chun lunged at me, his hand reaching for my throat. But before he could touch me, the officers behind me opened fire. The sound of gunshots echoed through the old house, deafening and chaotic. Chun crumpled to the ground, his gun clattering across the floor, a dark stain spreading across his chest. I stood there frozen, staring down at his body. My father rushed to my side, pulling me into his arms, his body shaking with sobs. The officers swarmed around us, securing the area, calling for medical assistance. But I couldn't hear any of it. All I could hear was the sound of my own heartbeat, pounding in my ears that it was over. It was finally over. Hours later, I sat in the back of a police car, wrapped in a blanket, staring out the window at the old house. Firefighters were still on the scene, hosing down the smoldering remains of the building. Chun had managed to trigger part of the explosion before he'd been shot, and the house had gone up in flames. But most of the evidence had been saved. The letters, the will, my mother's diary. They were all safe. They were all going to be used to bring justice for everything that had happened. My father was in the car next to me, his hand wrapped tightly around mine. He'd been quiet for the past hour, his face pale, his eyes distant. I knew he was processing everything, the same way I was. The years of hiding, the years of fear, the years of guilt. It would take a long time to heal from all of it. Ellie, he said finally, his voice hoarse. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I should have been there for you. I should have protected you. Instead, I let you face all of this alone. I squeezed his hand, feeling the weight of his words. You were doing what you thought was right, I said quietly. You were trying to survive. I can't blame you for that. But I blamed you, he said, his voice cracking. When I first found out about your mother's affair, I blamed you. I thought you knew. I thought you'd been keeping secrets from me. And I pushed you away. I made you feel like you were the enemy. I felt tears prickling at my eyes, but I blinked them back. It doesn't matter now, I said. What matters is that we're together. What matters is that we can start over. Start fresh. All of us. He looked at me, and I saw the hope flickering in his eyes, fragile but real. You mean that? I mean it, I said. We've been through hell, Dad. Both of us. But we're still here. We're still alive. And we're still a family. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt the tears finally spill down my cheeks. I cried for my mother, for the years we'd lost, for the pain we'd endured. I cried for the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. And I cried because for the first time in years, I felt hope. Real, genuine hope. The days that followed were a blur of police interviews, legal proceedings, and media attention. The story of the Hayes family scandal made headlines across the country, a tale of murder, betrayal, and redemption that captivated the public imagination. Margaret was charged with multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy, her confession used as evidence against her. Thomas Whitfield, her husband, testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence, revealing a decades-long pattern of manipulation and deceit. Anita was reunited with her family, her story of survival inspiring people across the nation. She testified at Margaret's trial, her quiet dignity and strength a stark contrast to the greed and cruelty of the woman who'd imprisoned her. The letters my mother had written were made public, shedding light on the secret life she'd led and the choices she'd made. It wasn't a flattering portrait, but it was an honest one. And it allowed the world to see her as a flawed, complex woman who'd done terrible things in the name of love and fear. And Victor Chun died in the hospital 2 days after the shooting, his secrets dying with him. But it didn't matter. The truth was already out there, documented and preserved. His name would be remembered, not as a successful lawyer or a respected businessman, but as a murderer. A monster who'd destroyed lives and families for his own selfish gain. That I sat on the front porch of my house, the one that had once been Margaret's, and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My father was inside, working with a team of accountants to restore the estate to its former glory. It was a slow process, but we were making progress. We were rebuilding, piece by piece, day by day. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, half expecting another threatening message. But it was just a text from a friend, asking if I wanted to grab coffee tomorrow. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of message I hadn't received in years. That I smiled, typing back a quick reply. And then I looked up at the sky, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, that I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd ever fully heal from everything that had happened. But I knew one thing for certain. I was free. Free from Margaret's manipulations, free from Chen's schemes, free from the weight of secrets and lies that had been suffocating me for years. I was free to write my own story. And I was going to make it a good one. The end was just the beginning.